Ladies and gentlemen, let's get one thing straight. This isn't your average love talk. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to speak truth. Raw, real, and probably a little uncomfortable, but necessary, because today, we're diving deep into something we don't talk about enough. The 3 ways women break men in relationships. Yeah, I said it. And no, this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. It's about owning our impact and understanding the emotional responsibility we carry in love. See, love isn't just about cute selfies and couple goals. It's about growth, connection, and sometimes healing what we didn't even know we were hurting. So buckle up. We're about to talk patterns, pain, and power, and how we can do better, not just for them, but for ourselves too. Emotional invalidation is one of the most damaging yet often overlooked ways a woman can unintentionally break a man in a relationship. At its core, emotional invalidation is the act of ignoring, minimizing, or dismissing someone's feelings, making them feel that their emotions are wrong, exaggerated, or irrelevant. While it might not always be done with harmful intent, its effects are deeply painful and long-lasting, especially for men who are already navigating a world that often tells them to suppress their emotions to appear strong. In many relationships, men find it difficult to express vulnerability. Society has conditioned them to believe that showing emotion is a sign of weakness. When a man finally opens up, shares his fears, doubts, or insecurities, he is stepping far outside of his comfort zone. This act of vulnerability is a rare and courageous moment. However, when a woman responds with disbelief, sarcasm, dismissal, or mockery, it cuts deeper than she may ever realize. Phrases like "you're overreacting," "man up," or "you're too sensitive" may seem harmless in the moment, but to a man who already struggles to express his emotions, these words can be soul-crushing. The danger of emotional invalidation lies in its subtlety. Unlike more obvious forms of mistreatment, it often flies under the radar. It can come in the form of eye rolls when he's talking about something serious, changing the subject when he expresses concern, or comparing his struggles to others in a way that diminishes his pain. Over time, these moments accumulate. He starts to believe that his emotions don't matter. He questions whether he's being dramatic. He begins to silence himself, not just with his partner, but with the world. When emotional invalidation becomes a pattern, it affects his identity. A man might begin to feel invisible, unheard, or unimportant. He may retreat emotionally, shutting down in future conversations. This emotional shutdown is not because he doesn't care, it's because he has learned that opening up leads to pain, not connection. And the saddest part, he may not even be fully aware that this dynamic is happening. He just knows that something doesn't feel safe anymore, so he builds walls to protect himself. This creates a ripple effect in the relationship. Communication weakens, intimacy fades, resentment grows in silence. The man might become less present, less engaged, or more irritable. On the outside, it may look like he's pulling away, but on the inside, he's quietly breaking. He's losing trust, not just in his partner, but in the idea that anyone can truly see or accept him for who he is emotionally. It's important to recognize that emotional invalidation doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes, it comes from a lack of emotional awareness, or from someone who themselves doesn't know how to sit with discomfort. But regardless of intent, the impact remains the same. When a woman repeatedly invalidates a man's emotions, she unintentionally reinforces the message that his inner world is not worth honoring. In a healthy relationship, both partners should feel safe to express themselves. When a man shares his truth, what he needs most is to be heard, not fixed, acknowledged, not judged. He needs to feel that his emotions are just as valid and important as anyone else's. Because when he does, he shows up with more presence, more love, and more strength than ever before. But when he doesn't, he fades, slowly, silently, and often without warning. Manipulative communication is another powerful yet often hidden way women can break men in relationships. It operates under the surface, masked by charm, emotion, or seemingly harmless habits. At its core, manipulation through communication is about control. It's about using words, silence, tone, or timing not to connect, but to influence the partner's actions, thoughts, or emotions in a way that benefits one side while slowly disempowering the other. This kind of behavior can appear in many forms. One of the most common is guilt tripping. It's when a woman makes a man feel bad for doing or not doing something, not through direct conversation, but by implying he's selfish, uncaring, or neglectful. It might sound like, "I guess I just care more than you do," or "if you really loved me, you would have known." These phrases are not open invitations for understanding. They are emotional traps. They don't allow room for the man to explain, understand, or be heard. Instead, they corner him, making him feel like the villain in a story where his intentions were never evil to begin with. Another form of manipulative communication is the use of silence as punishment. This silent treatment is not the same as needing space to cool off or think. This is about deliberately withholding communication to create confusion, anxiety, or regret. It leaves the man guessing what went wrong, walking on eggshells, trying to fix something he doesn't even fully understand. Over time, this builds emotional insecurity. He learns that one wrong word could cost him days of coldness, and so he stops being honest. He starts filtering himself, choosing silence over truth just to maintain peace even if it costs him his voice. Passive aggression is another destructive form of manipulation. Instead of expressing anger or disappointment directly, the woman might resort to sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or vague criticisms. This makes it difficult for the man to respond clearly because the attacks are cloaked in humor or ambiguity. He knows something is wrong, but every time he tries to bring it up, it gets brushed off as just a joke, or "you're being too sensitive." This not only invalidates his emotional response, but also creates a dynamic where he constantly questions himself. Then there's emotional baiting, provoking a reaction on purpose to prove a point. This might involve bringing up sensitive topics at the worst moments, making accusations to test loyalty, or intentionally creating scenarios to observe how he responds. It's a way to force emotional vulnerability under pressure, but not for the sake of connection, for the sake of control. It's not about solving problems together, but about seeing how much he's willing to tolerate or prove. Over time, manipulative communication erodes a man's sense of self. It makes him feel like he's always wrong, always failing, always under a microscope. It creates a state of emotional exhaustion. He begins to believe that no matter what he does, it will never be enough. And when he tries to express how these patterns make him feel, he may be met with defensiveness or denial. "You're too sensitive," "you're imagining things," or "I didn't mean it like that," are common responses that further distort the reality of what's happening. What's especially dangerous is that many of these behaviors don't always look toxic on the surface. They can be masked as concern, humor, or emotional expression. But the underlying pattern is clear. Communication is not being used to build, it's being used to bend. Over time, the man stops communicating altogether, not because he has nothing to say, but because he feels nothing he says will be heard the right way. Conditional love is a silent breaker of men in relationships, and one of the most emotionally destabilizing patterns a man can experience with a partner. At its root, conditional love is the idea that affection, support, and validation are only given when certain expectations are met. It's not love that says, "I see you and accept you," but rather, "I will love you if." It becomes a transaction rather than a connection, and over time, it can deeply damage a man's sense of worth and emotional safety within the relationship. In the early stages, conditional love can be difficult to identify. It might come across as high standards or strong boundaries, but as time passes, a pattern begins to emerge, one where the man feels he has to constantly perform, achieve, or act a certain way just to earn basic affection or peace. Whether it's needing to make enough money, behave perfectly in social settings, always agree with her, or suppress his own needs to avoid conflict, he begins to understand that love is something he must work for, not something he is freely given. The emotional toll of this can be enormous. A man in this position starts to internalize the belief that who he is, as he is never enough, that he is only worthy of love when he checks the right boxes, meets the right conditions, or acts in ways that please his partner. He becomes hyper, aware of every mistake, every misstep, constantly fearing that any failure could lead to emotional withdrawal, anger, or rejection. Over time, this creates anxiety, insecurity, and emotional exhaustion. In relationships marked by conditional love, a man may also find that affection is used as a reward system. When he does something his partner approves of, he is met with warmth, attention, and praise. But when he makes a mistake or expresses a different opinion, that affection disappears. This unpredictability creates a push-pull dynamic that keeps him emotionally off balance. He never knows where he stands. He might try harder, give more, compromise repeatedly, hoping to regain the connection, but it always feels just out of reach unless he's performing exactly how she wants him to. This kind of relationship dynamic can also make a man suppress his authentic self. He may start to hide parts of his personality, passions, or perspectives to avoid judgment. He may stop speaking up about his own needs or feelings, not because he doesn't have them, but because he's learned that expressing them can cost him the affection he craves. In the end, he becomes a version of himself shaped more by fear than love, a man who no longer feels free to be himself within the one place where he should feel safest. Another aspect of conditional love is the way it impacts trust. Love that is given or taken away based on performance creates instability. The man may struggle to trust his partner's feelings for him, constantly wondering if they are genuine or just a response to his most recent actions. This creates emotional hypervigilance, where he's always monitoring his behavior, walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace or maintain approval. This state of emotional survival eventually leads to resentment and emotional distance, not because he doesn't care, but because he's been trained to believe that love is not consistent or secure. What often gets overlooked is that conditional love doesn't always come from a place of cruelty. Sometimes it comes from unresolved trauma, unrealistic expectations, or a lack of emotional maturity. But regardless of the source, the outcome is the same. The man learns that love is a tool of control, not a space of freedom. He may stay and continue to try harder, hoping he can earn more love, or he may emotionally detach to protect himself from the constant feeling of not being enough. Either way, the relationship becomes less about mutual growth and more about survival. Public disrespect is one of the most humiliating and deeply cutting ways a woman can break a man in a relationship. And like private conflicts that allow space for resolution and vulnerability, public disrespect puts a man in a position where his dignity, confidence, and sense of identity are exposed to judgment, often without his ability to defend himself. It's not just the words or actions that hurt, it's the audience. It's the moment when a disagreement becomes a performance, and the man becomes the target. This kind of behavior can take many forms. It might look like mocking him in front of friends, interrupting him mid-sentence to correct or belittle him, making sarcastic jokes at his expense, or airing private issues in group settings. Sometimes it's done under the guise of humor, a harmless joke. But the message underneath is clear. His value, intelligence, or capability is being questioned publicly. What makes it more painful is that it often happens in moments when he least expects it, and the shock of it can leave him feeling powerless and humiliated. Men, like anyone, have egos that are shaped by the way they're seen by others, especially by their partner. When the person he loves and trusts becomes the one who undermines him in front of others, it's not just a bruise to the ego, it's a blow to his sense of safety in the relationship. He starts to question whether he is respected, not only in private, but in the eyes of others who now see him through the lens his partner has painted. One of the most damaging elements of public disrespect is the shame it creates. A man may not immediately express how deeply it hurt him, especially if he's in a room full of people. He might laugh it off, stay quiet, or act like it didn't bother him, because showing pain in front of others could feel like an even greater loss of control. But internally, that moment sticks. It replays in his mind. He analyzes every second, every word, wondering why it happened and how others now perceive him because of it. Over time, repeated instances of public disrespect can create a deep emotional distance. He may begin to avoid social situations with his partner, fearing that she will use those moments to assert dominance or embarrass him again. He may stop expressing his opinions in group settings, or feel silenced even when he has something meaningful to say. This isn't because he's weak, it's because he's protecting himself from being made small in spaces where he should feel supported. Public disrespect also damages trust. A man wants to know that his partner is his teammate, someone who will stand with him in public, even if they're working through things in private. When that trust is broken, it creates confusion. He doesn't know what version of her he will get in front of others, the supportive partner or the one who throws him under the bus for a laugh, a point, or validation. That inconsistency keeps him emotionally on edge and begins to chip away at the foundation of the relationship. What makes this even more complex is how often this behavior is minimized. Society tends to downplay a man's emotional pain, especially when it comes to being hurt by words or public embarrassment. He may be told to take a joke or not be so sensitive, but the reality is that these experiences cut deeply, especially when they come from someone he loves. The damage isn't just in the moment, it's in the lingering doubt, the shrinking confidence, and the feeling that he can no longer trust his partner with his vulnerability in any setting. When public disrespect becomes a pattern, the man may begin to question his own identity. He might wonder if he's really the person he thought he was, or if others now see him as weak, foolish, or unworthy because of how he was portrayed. This internal struggle becomes a silent battle, often hidden behind a calm face or a forced smile, while beneath it lies a deep sense of betrayal.